Okay, next up is Sam Hartman, and he's talking about DJCLI, Command Line DJ Tools. We look forward to listening.
So, hi. So, I've been playing around with music. Some of you saw me perform, and I a couple times this week. But what I'm here to talk about is how Debian and free software in particular are a force for empowering us and letting us live our dreams. So, free software, Debian allows us to have a power. We've seen, I guess, actually, it's really amazing that you're the one introducing me to this talk, because like one of your lightning talks at Cape Town was the moment at which I realized that Debian was a community of people who hadn't given up on the idea of changing the world. A group of people who believed that we as individuals actually had the power to make small changes that over time amplified and it changed the world around us. That basically there were people there in the Cape Town lightning talks who were talking about how they saw Debian as a tool that allowed them to enact the various changes they wanted to make on the world, whether it was better environmental stuff, dealing with pollution, feeding the world, connecting with people around the world, fighting disease. And okay, I'm not doing anything that's that global, but what I am doing is finding connection and joy and happiness. And Debian is a tool for that as well. And so I'd kind of like to talk about my journey and how writing free software has brought me closer to things that I, because I was blind, assumed I could never have. So, dance and music have really, over the last 20 years, been important to me. Whether it's a group of people getting together out in the woods, dancing around a fire, letting go and being in a little world that's more sacred. Or whether it's in a club, people having fun. Or I think for me, one of the most moving episodes I saw in the dance community was there was a few years ago, famous DJ Paul van Dyk fell off the stage at State of Trance Utrecht and fell 20 feet and had brain damage and spinal injuries and really couldn't talk for a number of months. And unfortunately, this was really negatively impacting his radio show. And in some ways potentially impacting his livelihood, and it wasn't clear how well he was going to recover. And what happened is the entire DJ community of really big name DJs stood in and filled in for his show. Some people he directly worked with, but some people who were on entirely different labels. Basically to say, hey, we're going to stick together as a community and we're going to help each other out in times of need. And it's been, my experience has been that the dance community has been like that, as individuals as well as the big names. And to me, that's what music means. And so it's always been pretty special. And that's been true at small levels at all of the shows I've attended. I remember a show in Toronto where this guy kind of shows up. Okay, we want to kill, yes. Sorry, I left IRC open and that was a bad idea. And basically, against this loud backdrop of a club, he's walking me through, teaching me how to make the peace and unity signs, and basically saying, hey, look, if you're willing to commit to peace, unity, and love, you're welcome as part of our community. And then I shared, one of my communities, one of my sort of tribal communities, truths about, how love is part of all of us in exchange. And it was this really moving moment, and that's kind of been the sort of what music means to me, is that kind of one-on-one all the way up through community connection. In some ways not entirely dissimilar to how I view Debian. But my early exposure to music So, for a variety of reasons, it was kind of late when I started really learning music. And I tried to learn piano, and it was actually a lot of fun, and I was enjoying it until I got to a point where my ability to memorize music was sort of being challenged by the complexity of music I was playing. And unfortunately, the stuff I was taking was really focused on memorization, and then once you got good at memorization, going into sight reading. Well, the thing about sight reading is the whole sight thing. Yes, there is music braille, but so what am I going to do? This hand's reading while this hand's playing. Okay, great for one-handed piano. I guess I didn't really need any harmony or chords. But also, actually, it turns out that you can't read music braille in one time. It's really, music braille is not a good thing. I guess it's the best solution to a really impossible problem, but it's nowhere near as easy to interact with as a staff once you know it. And so I basically gave up on music as something, okay, I could listen to it, but it was never going to be a part of my life. And that was kind of where I was, in junior high school, until a couple of years ago. So I was really having a bad month, and I needed a project to distract me. And so I decided that I was going to go listen to network traffic. You've got MRTG and all those great things, and that's great for all of you out there, but I'd kind of like to know what's going on my network too. And so I decided I was going to listen to it. And so I wanted to be able to listen to, what the bandwidth was like, what the, how many systems were involved, and that sort of thing. And, be able to tell things like whether our ARPs were getting completed and that sort of thing. And so I decided I was going to write a tool to do that. So basically what I decided I was going to do is, parse TCP dump output and kind of add energy to various streams. And the more activity a stream was seeing, the more, the louder and the more complex its melody. And I also decided that I would localize the sources. Like if you're listening to this on a headphone, and you have like 2 or 3 sources, then like the first one will be over on your left ear, the second one will be over on your right ear, and then like the third will be directly in front of you, and then one will be behind. And it goes on and sort of puts the sources into a space as you. And so it was a great project. And what I realized is actually, I can put my mind to it. I can learn some music theory. And I can remember all those, those math problems that I took in college and was like, oh, recurrence relations, yeah, what? Come on. You can always use the continuous time approximation. Who really cares about all this? And then it turns out that when you're trying to do things in real time with audio, actually, no, really, that stuff matters a lot. And if you don't want to have annoying clicks or things that aren't smooth, then you're gonna run into that. And it was an amazing and fun project. And basically, I realized, okay, this wasn't really making music, but it was creating something, and it was doing something that was, closer than I'd ever been before. It was a lot of fun. And so, because there was free software, because I could look at a lot of really low-level stuff, I could gain the skill to create something new. I wasn't forced to just use the tools that someone had provided to me. It was empowering. So here I'm going to play a little bit of a demo from the TCP, from TCPSCORE. This is basically, it's the full feed of one of our routers at work. The network wasn't very busy, but there's some web traffic and stuff in the background. And then midway through, one of the machines starts an apt full upgrade and starts, pulling in a good chunk of I think it was like most of an upgrade to Buster that started up, and so you see a fair amount of stuff. And that's just random, mostly unrelated network traffic there. And soon we're going to get the apt upgrade. The pops are DNS. Yeah. Okay, here we're getting the apt upgrade coming in. Like it's consistent. It's basically the same melody. It's one side is taking full volume to full capacity of the network, and the other side was basically just sending ACKs. The pings and pongs are literally pings and pongs. There was a ISING instance going in the background as well. And so, that was a really fun project. But then, after that, I got into, I had an interesting opportunity with my wedding. I really wanted, dance by this point, dance had become really important to me. And I wanted that to be part of my wedding. And so I started thinking about what I wanted to do with dance. And I noticed that there was a huge thematic overlap between what I was seeing in the clubs and seeing in the DJ shows I listened to, and what I was doing out in the woods. The songs were different, the instruments were different, the time signatures were different. There's not a lot of 11/8 in the clubs, I'll tell you that much. But yet, what people were trying to do, music is a powerful force for introspection and connection and meditation, and becoming closer to yourself and the people around you was uniform across these. And I really wanted to show that at my wedding, to show how there were these different people viewing things entirely differently all across the world, coming to the same goals at least. And I thought that was kind of awesome. So I decided I was going to show that overlap. And so I put together a playlist, with some trance songs and some pagan songs, and was like going to go try and move forward with this, and it didn't really work. It's boring. The tracks, some of the dance tracks are really long, and if you're trying to condense and show something in an hour or two, you can't play that many 7-9 minute tracks. And besides, they're actually meant to be mixed. And so a playlist wasn't going to be enough. I was going to need to work on the transitions and to put things together and to compose them. But I didn't have the skills to do that. So hire someone, right? Yeah. I'm sure that you could explain to a DJ in 5 minutes exactly how you want some really particular theme, and then you want it to all flow together. And of course, you're going to get your explanation right because, having never played with it, you're going to still be able to guess exactly what's going to work and what isn't. Well, maybe you can do that. I sure can. So I decided I was going to have to do it myself. Because how hard can it actually be? So, right, all I got to do is install some DJ software, and go play with it, right? No big deal. Debian has everything. And there even are options, and actually Mix really was inspirational and helpful. Well, but, there's this minor problem. I'm blind. So, unfortunately, when I pull up Mix in Orca, the Debian screen reader, it turns out that, yeah, I can see the file browsers, and I can see the keyboard shortcuts, and I think I can even get it to start playing. But really, a lot of the stuff that matters isn't there. And so it's basically not enough of the interface was available to me. And unfortunately, the Windows software is even worse. There just aren't really a lot of tools for blind DJs who want to do things the electronic way. Yeah, I could get a couple turntables, but that really wasn't my style. I'm a computer guy. So I decided to write my own. How hard can that be? So I decided I was going to make a command line interface for doing DJ stuff. To be clear, then one of my friends gave me a DJ controller. He's like, wow, here, you seem really into this. I have this spare DJ controller lying around. And so it ended up being a command line output at least, but at least for some of the time, there's live input from a MIDI device. But I decided I was going to reuse some components. I wasn't going to write my own real-time sound engine. I was going to look up both at Echosound, which I'd run through Nama, and Csound, which I'd used a number of times. I ended up settling on Csound for a number of reasons. Csound is scary and awesome all at the same time. We'll give a little bit of a demonstration of that in just a bit. But the cool thing about Debian is that I get to, in free software, I get to reuse the parts of this that aren't about the interface. I get to entirely reuse a beat detection plugin and a key detection plugin. And, you know, I don't have to write a real-time sound engine. I get to reuse that. And so Debian allowed me to approach the part of the problem that was important to me and reuse enough to make the problem tractable. Without free software, if I was forced to do this all on my own, I'd either be, you know, begging some APIs and kits that probably wouldn't be a good fit, or I'd be having to do the whole thing from scratch, and I never would have even gotten off the ground. And so Debian lets us find the pieces that are important to us and focus on those, but still build bigger systems. And that's really huge. So what did I decide to do? Well, I knew I was going to be, you know, making a lot of mistakes because I was new at this whole thing. And so I wanted to, I was like, oh, so I want it to be kind of like Photoshop or GIMP, and so I can go have a bunch of layers and edit things, and it'll save all the edits, and then, you know, I can go back and fix things. Of course, I also want to be able to do things live so I can do things fast, right? That makes a lot of sense. Of course, no one does that. I learned why, but I succeeded anyway. Basically, you know, it turns out that pretty much, like, if you pick a professional program like Ableton Live, you'll either have the live mode or the timeline mode. They don't go together. So, unfortunately, let's see, does this, oh no, okay. Hold on, why am I not? Oh. No. Right. Wait, why did we? Right. Okay, I don't understand. What slide is this? This is the. Okay, I don't understand why I lost the timelines. Oh. No, okay. Right, so unfortunately, it seems not to let me get back to one of my slides, but basically, the problem with timeline is that you need, there are multiple levels of, there's information you need for a timeline view that you don't need for doing it live. Like if I turn off a song in a live mode, it just stops the music. But in an editing mode, did I want to delete that? Was it a mistake, or is it just done? Similarly, if I place another version of a song, am I moving it? Or did I think that track was so cool I wanted to play it more than once? And so there are a lot of things you need to infer that don't matter for the live performance that are critical for the editing. And I ended up facing a lot of trade-offs that apparently other people who've done this, you know, just mostly didn't face because they didn't try and solve that problem. There were a lot of other, you know, really unfortunate. There were a lot of other unfortunate things that I ran across as I realized I didn't know what I was doing. There was this one moment where I'm, you know, playing something and someone's like, "That's totally in the wrong key. Those don't go together." I'm like, "Wait. You mean the key matters? Like, what are you saying? What does that mean? Are you saying that there's actually a place where, because of things in the two different songs, you're gonna get a 2 interval, like, you know, a chord followed by the next half step up?" And the person's like, "Huh, what?" Because I kind of sort of understood some music theory, but, you know, I didn't really know what I was doing. And then, of course, the answer is yes, that's exactly what you mean, more or less. And you get dissonances if you don't actually pay attention to the key. And once I thought about it a little bit, I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, that's going to happen very often if you don't look at, like, getting the key right. But it was really kind of embarrassing because I, like, completely missed an entire, you know, critical aspect of thinking about this. And then there was this other moment where I'm like, why do all these DG programs have a loop button? What's that all about? And then I realized, oh, they, like, actually extend the song and make it fit what they're doing. Oh. Yeah, that would be kind of cool. I wish I'd thought about that. And then a little bit later, I was like, you know, this looping thing is cool, but man, getting those loop points right, hitting the button at the exact right moment, that's really hard. Turns out it's so hard that actually the programs have a lot of automation, so you don't ever have to do that most of the time. You know, like it's very common to say, I want a 4 BPM loop or something like that. And yet, there was a number of things that I really did that worked pretty well. So I did a very good job of a synchronize to beat button, basically, both for doing beat matching and also lining 2 songs up, so you can very easily get things to match up together. And that was kind of cool. And then one of the videos I was listening on how to professionally DJ basically said that the most important thing you've got is that list on paper in your wallet of CDs of where you start in each song, you know, in multiple places to start. And so I did a very good, you know, database support for doing that and for easily getting to the right place in a track. And that's really proven incredibly valuable in approaching things. And I actually really got to a point where I can go back and edit things and, you know, fix up minor mistakes, and I can perform something live and then go fix it up later and actually learn from my mistakes and produce pretty good results, you know, fixing up the things I've done live without having to redo it all from scratch. And so I'm very pleased with that. So here's a little bit about kind of the model I came up with. Did the image actually come through on this? Okay, great. So basically there's a lot of time travel and time warp and nonlinear time involved in DJing. In my model, there's 3 different time streams. There's the mix time, which is going along at 1 second per second. And you know, you probably want more than 1 track in a DJ mix, and that's where you go input your tracks. And then there's a timeline, there's a track time, and the start point of the track is in mix time, which maps to the cue point of the track in track time. Track time also goes along at 1 second per second, but where we apply all the fades and the local track effects in track time. But there's an entire discontinuous, you know, time travel-y, time warp mapping from track time to file time. First of all, file time may not go at 1 second per second. If you're doing beat matching, you'll slow down or speed up a track to make it work. You end up with, and also because of loops and wanting to jump to a track or extend it or shorten it, you'll just have arbitrary discontinuities in the track time. And so basically there are 3 different ways of looking at time that I ended up approaching. I think that's another reason why you don't actually need all of these if you're only doing things on an edited timeline, because you can, some of these you help make the live performance possible. And so another reason why I think most people don't actually support both timeline and live at the same time is that you know, you need to be comfortable with time travel and time that doesn't move at 1 second per second and a lot of things like that. And, you know, if you haven't read enough science fiction, that's just not going to work. So, so free software has been, getting back to, again, what did I get out of free software here? I mean, basically, I actually understand this at a really deep level. I understand what I've done. And I've really sort of built this in you know, and gained this huge understanding of how, you know, filters work together, or how you do beat matching, or you know, how MIDI works and all that sort of thing. And yet, I find that it's really hard to talk to people who have the commercial tools, because I'm sitting there and like they're going, hey, you know, do you have a natural sounding reverb effect? I'm like, well, I mean, probably, but how does that work? Is that like, you know, how many comb filters are you talking about there? And they'll be like, I mean, I hit the natural sounding reverb button. It's like on the 3rd menu on Ableton, you know? Like, no, sorry. I mean, is that more of a delay, or is that actually a reverb? Is that just done with filter. Like, no, it's not a filter. I mean, I have different filters. But no, this is a reverb, not a filter. But what is a reverb? And it's just this really frustrating conversation. It's they have a lot. They're able to look at things in terms of just how they sound, without understanding the how they work, or the what they are. And I have a lot fewer tools, but I understand them more deeply. It's kind of the do it yourself. Yes, my car may not, yes, my laptop may not actually always boot, but at least I know why it doesn't boot, and I understand at least some of those error messages that are getting printed. But it's really nice to actually understand what's going on and what you're doing. So another kind of one of these, we talk about math here, and some of the math problems you run into, and as you do understand it deeply. Okay, this is when you turn one of those wheels on a DJ controller, to simulate turning a record player. You basically get pulses. Like the dots here are representing, like you might be getting like 450 pulses a second if you're turning it at about 45 RPM, at least on my controller. And this makes an obvious curve, right? Well, I mean, it's obvious when you can look at the whole thing. But when you're just starting to see those pulses come in as MIDI events, and all you can see is just what's right here, right where you are now, and what you'd really like to do is produce that second curve. Turns out, I mean, yeah, sure, if you're a DSP person, you know exactly what to do probably. I mean, it sort of looks like it's kind of an integral, except it's going to be a discrete time integral. So I ended up doing it as a weighted average of weighted averages, which seems actually pretty similar to what mix ended up doing as well. But basically, it's one of those, you run into all sorts of kind of little math problems like this where, you end up having to remember a lot more about DSPs than I ever knew that I would need to remember from college, and even sometimes go learn a bunch. But it's a lot of fun because, again, I have a really good understanding of what I'm doing at that level. And so I guess kind of the moral of the story for me is that, if you saw me playing this week, you can see I've been having a huge amount of fun with this. And I think the moral of this story I have for you is that free software lets us do this. It lets us actually, the rest of the world is trying to specialize and give you a box that does one thing, and without you needing to understand it. And there's some advantages to that. It's kind of nice to not necessarily need to understand how everything works. But free software lets us gain the power that was taken away by that stuff, and lets us actually approach these things and learn about them and take control of them and take ownership of them. See, for many years of my life, I thought music was just going to be something I listened to. But because I was willing to take that power and spend the time to make this my own, music is now something I'm part of in a way that I never would have imagined before. And that's because free software gives me that power to make the problem tractable for me. And Debian's role in all of this, of course, is that Debian is this collection of free software, and it's the tools to manipulate free software. And it means that I know I'm going to find the source. It's not just mythical that, oh yeah, it'll probably build. I know it does, because it builds every time someone uploads it. And so it gives me the framework in which to actually accomplish those goals. And so, right, okay, I've more or less already said everything on this slide. So on to some fun. Yeah, and so we have to have a couple of little programming problems. So, nice simple set. This is C-Sound instrument code. C-Sound has its own interesting little programming language. Can anyone guess what this program does? Huh? Oh, well, no, this is hello world. I mean, see, again, it's a print hello world. But notice the if statement. It prints hello world. That's right. When we say if false condition, it will still print hello world. Again, if I replace that K1 with an I1, it will do nothing. So basically, what the interesting thing here that I keep tripping up on is that this is a real-time language. It has, your code runs at multiple different times. There's a time that runs kind of at the not very important real time, basically, the kind of slow time when you're adjusting global parameters or setting up an instrument. That's called I time. And then it runs again at the control rate, which might be like 400 times a second. And then it runs again at the A rate, which is like 41,000 or 48,000 times a second. And it turns out that depending on what kind of variables you use in what kind of statement, sometimes if can be both true and false. And boy, is that confusing. But that's just, it's basically every domain you approach, you're going to run into some weird thing like that. And it was kind of fun. And I understand why they did that. It really is non-intuitive until you get used to it. And then it's still non-intuitive, but you wouldn't really do it any other way. So, there's my code. It is not in Debian. It's really going to be, I will admit that it would probably be pretty hard for someone else to use it. Because there's a patch to SH that I need to deal with. And also because it's really kind of underdocumented. I will be working on that. The point of this talk is not about how some cool programming project I did. The point of this talk is about how I took control of my life using the tools we have available. So how am I doing on time here? Okay, so I can take some questions, or I can show you a little bit of what, effectively how it works.
Any question? There's one question coming to the mic.
Excuse me. Have you been able to reverse engineer the effects from the commercial software?
No, I haven't really had any desire to do that. Honestly, there aren't a lot of effects I use. What I've done is I've made it very easy to make new effects. You just can write them as C-Sound instrument code. And that gives you, if you want it, DSSI, LV2, and LADSPA as well. And also, honestly, C-Sound has a huge variety of the, filters and reverbs and stuff and flangers and all that sort of stuff built in. So I haven't really, I think that if I were to start getting into music production more than just DJing, I might care a lot more about the effects.
There's another question, I think.
Sam, when you tried to play the piano, besides the Braille reading, did you try some voice reader like the one you are using on your computer?
No, I never have tried that. It might be possible to learn to do that. I certainly do not currently have that skill to be able to read and play at the same time. That seems like you'd want to somehow, have it be a little bit ahead of you. It seems like there would be some really interesting challenges there. Maybe you'd want like a tongue switch or something to move it to back up or move forward, like to control where it was in relation to where you were playing. I'm not sure. But because your feet are on the sustain and the other pedals, and your hands are kind of busy doing notes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there more questions? There's not more questions at the moment. Do you want to go through some?
Sure, I can. Let's see. Where are we doing? Okay, so let's do DAC 0. we're selecting a particular pulse audio, and I don't know why it thinks it wants the HID. No, what? Okay, it's giving me the possible command completions. I didn't realize it did that. That's kind of lame. Sound slash. I understand that we've been subjected to this before. Okay, and so now we are on. Actually, we're going to discard that song. Okay, we're going to load this song, and rather than starting it, we're going to preview it. Now, currently, I think we have our... So, normally you have speakers that are separate from your headphones. But what I can do, currently I'm listening to what would go to the DJ's headphones. And so in particular, I'm listening to the current track. And let's... although I actually don't... So basically, I've brought this up to, I think, about 128 BPM. But I actually don't want... For this, I want it in its original pitch. But so I haven't actually started it. Like if I listen to what the audience would be hearing, which is track 2, we see we're on nothing. But so I can move around in this. And basically I'm moving around in the song, and then I can decide, let's actually start mixing this into the main output. Now we didn't notice a change, but now if we go to the audience track, it's playing. Let's see what we can get. I'm going to load, actually, no, LPL projects / DPL / DPL. Oops. Okay. LPL projects / DPL / okay, so basically what I've done there is I've loaded a playlist of songs that I was using for my sets early in the week, and I want to let's do key matching and BPM matching. Well, that's kind of annoying. Okay, how about... Sorry, I'm... So it thinks that that song is going to match. I'm a little skeptical. Okay, this will actually work pretty well. Okay, so we've picked a song, and I happen to know that cue point 6 in that song will be a reasonable place to start. So we're going to preview that. And we don't hear it because, again, we're listening to the audience mix. And we're going to synchronize that to A. And then we will place U. And fade in at... and then we'll... that didn't match nearly as well as I would hoped it would, so let's try something. Yep, understood. Actually, that's... Wow, that sucks. What? Why are we not? Oh, I'm an idiot. And so what you're seeing here is that honestly, like, the command line part of this works a heck of a lot better if you're doing something like that you're editing rather than for live. For all the live stuff these days, I use a controller which just wouldn't have fit on stage. But that style of approach actually really does work reasonably well for editing and fixing up. And also, I will admit that my approaches were a little bit limited here because I didn't want to play a large chunk of commercial music in a talk that we're videoing. And I didn't really have as good of a cue point database for some of the free stuff that I had. But basically, that's kind of how it works. And then with a controller, a lot of the things that were long commands were just single button clicks. So, any final questions?
Thanks. There's more questions. Do you want to go to the thing?
What is the name of the? I have seen this DJ utils, but are you using some other tools? And
no. So the project on Salsa is DJCLI. I just didn't know what to call it, and I never rename my own Git checkout.
Okay, so it is available in the Debian repositories?
No, it is not in Debian. It is available on Salsa.
Okay.
It will be a little bit tricky for someone else to use. I would be happy to work with someone who wants to. It's just underdocumented at the current point.
I see. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Thanks. And I just want to comment. In the beginning, you go, "Oh, this isn't as global as like trying to feed the world or trying to whatever." But what I've learned in my industry, I'm quite a generalist that I hop across industries, and sometimes just doing something for fun, like what you're doing mostly, like gives people like me who don't have enough like IT knowledge enough to work on, and then it just opens up a whole nother world for like the serious stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
All right, I think that's it. Thank you very much for giving us this talk. Let's give another.